5039 project that we've been working on for, turns out several years. Some of this got interrupted by the pandemic, but despite that, we were able to complete this project. So a number of you have been involved. We've had a number of calls here over the last year or so. But today, what we're prepared to do is to show you the maturity assessment that we've been working on here. We've had some feedback from folks here over the last few months, but we want to go through that more methodically and give you all some chance to provide some input and feedback on that maturity assessment. But again, the purpose of this project, and again, since Mary's not on the call, I'll just kind of speak for her, and if she gets on the call, she can talk a little bit more. And Chell was also one of the originators. But the purpose of this project was to essentially do a couple different things, and probably let me know if you're seeing the PowerPoint.
Yes, we do see it.
Yes, we do.
So again, the purpose of this project was several different things that we were asked to do. The first thing was to come up with a definition, and I think all of us who are in the water sector know that there's a lot of definitions around what an intelligent water system, smart utility is, and they're sort of intermingled. But we spent a lot of time, and most of you were on the phone call here, were part of those discussions at one time or another. But and again, I won't read these definitions for you since you can see them, and we'll make this available. But we did define essentially what is an intelligent water system. We spent a lot of time trying to understand what an intelligent water system is and its components, and we're going to go through that here later on. We also talked and tried to define what a smart utility is, and there's a definition there. That's also sort of evolved, and Cello's been working with WRF and WEF on what's called WISE, which is sort of the next stage of that thought process. But these are the definitions. So this was one of our key deliverables, and although it looks very simple, we can imagine there was a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth to come up with definitions that would work for our industry. So that was one of our first major deliverables. One of our next deliverables was to identify what is a frame, what is the smart utility, what does an IWS framework look like? So there was
Kevin,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but Mary Smith is on the phone.
Okay, good. Hey, Mary, I can interrupt or I can complete this slide here, but we wanted you to maybe kick off things a little bit too. So how would you like to proceed, Mary?
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and finish this?
Okay, sounds good. So just kind of going through, Mary, our key deliverables. So our second deliverable, major deliverable here, was to identify a framework for an IWS/smart utility. And so we spent a lot of time defining what an intelligent water system is and its components and layers. And I think most of you have seen this before. And the maturity assessment that we've developed essentially is targeted towards that IWS, with the recognition that there are other efforts and there are other components of a smart utility, which is the people and process aspect, which has been covered by other projects in WRF and the work that is being done by WISE, and there's a number of folks that are on this call that have been involved in those two efforts. But our remit for this project was really to come up on the technology side with a framework for how intelligent water system interacts. So that was our next deliverable. The final deliverable essentially is to come up with a maturity model assessment. And so that's one important thing that we want to make clear to everybody. First of all, our remit was in this technology space and these layers that probably later on very shortly is going to show you and go through what this maturity assessment looks like. And I think he sent out the link. But one of the key things that we wanted to make sure that everybody understood was that what we've developed is a maturity model and maturity assessment. It's not a survey that you sit down and complete in 10, 15, 20 minutes. This is, as you'll see very soon, this is more about looking at a business process function or a functional area, and probably working in a work group situation. There's very few people that probably know all the answers to this particular assessment. So we designed this with the idea that this is more of a work group or an assessment that would, since we're looking at it from a business process perspective, that it requires more than just one person to sit down and do this in 15, 20 minutes. So this is that's a really important concept to understand. With that, so what we're going to do here shortly is Prabhu is going to go through this maturity assessment. We're going to ask you some questions after each layer and at the end to get your feedback and thoughts. Having said that, I think, Mary, I'll stop here, and why don't I turn this back to you?
Sure. So thank you for doing this. I actually was not aware of the meeting until 5 minutes ago, so I'm sorry. I'm not really prepared, but I really appreciate you sharing this with everybody. I think this is going to be a good addition to our portfolio, and yeah, I look forward to getting this out there soon. Unfortunately, I can only stay to the top of the hour because I have a packed meeting for another project.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Sorry we didn't get that out to you.
Glad you did.
Yeah. So sort of the ground rules going forward, and maybe I'll stop and see if anybody has any macro level questions before we move over to Prabhu. Let me just stop and see if anybody has any questions or thoughts on sort of what the general scope of what we were supposed to achieve here. So I'll stop and ask any questions for anyone. All right, hearing none. So the next thing we wanted to do is we have plenty of time to do this, and we wanted to leave enough time for discussion. We really didn't really want to, we're doing some presentation, but we really want to get people's inputs and thoughts. So what Prabhu is going to be doing here is he's going to be walking through the maturity assessment that we've developed. I think everybody got a link to that. We're going to be after each of the layers, we're going to be stopping there and asking some questions and feedback, make sure people have a chance to provide some input or thoughts, or for us to provide some clarifications. And at the very end, we're going to ask some additional follow-up questions, and Cello's helped us gen up a little Mentimeter survey thing towards the end. So that's kind of the ground rules for the meeting. When we do go into discussions about each of the layers, we're going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you have questions as you go along, feel free to put your comments and questions in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that if people have questions, but we will be stopping at each of the layers. So further ado, Mr. Prabhu, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Mary, apologies. Thank you again for everybody here who's joined this call. As Kevin was talking about, we have a lot of time. We're going to go through the assessment itself today and take a pause at every layer, every section that we have, and have some questions and comments from you guys. With that said, we want to keep reiterating probably throughout the assessment that the maturity assessment that we have created is meant to be evaluating a business process or a function. We can see some examples as we go through it. So it's not done at the highest level of the organization, which you probably have seen in several places, several maturity models. It just talks about you have data governance and higher level ones, but this is specifically focused on a particular business process that the utility is interested to improve or find where they are in terms of how they are leveraging their technology systems and solutions. With that said, so I believe everyone got the link. When you click on the link, the IWS assessment link, this is what you will land on. As you see, there is this little table of contents on the side that shows what are the different major sections or parts, however you want to call it, of this whole assessment is, which starts with the introduction and we're going to capture some general information about the business process and utility and some of the other relevant information related to the business process. Then we go into the assessment of the 4 layers itself. If anyone has questions about each layer, we'll explain the details of what each layers are as we go through it. But this is what you will land on when you click that link. And the first page actually asks you, if this is your first time, what would you like to do? Would you want to go through, some of these introduction sections, or just to continue the assessment if you have already gone through some of the instructions? And we've also created a link to download the entire assessment itself. It's in a PowerPoint. If you click this, it'll basically ask you to download this PowerPoint. So you can download it and see what each section is made up of. Because, as Kevin was saying, this is not a survey, right? This is an assessment tool which requires a collaborative effort with all the relevant people and staff and potentially other stakeholders involved in the business process. So this instructions document could help you plan for who needs to be in here. So that's the first one. So let's go through each one of them. And so let's say if I hit review it, introduction instructions, and click next, it'll take you to the next section basically. And this is what you will see. Again, it's a very brief introduction of what the project is about, what the objectives were, as Kevin was talking about. One of those was about the framework. What you see here is a smaller, condensed version of the framework, right? And the definition that we talked about, and then the assessment tool. And that's what this project is all about. And the definitions of intelligent water system and water smart utility are here. And from this framework picture, you can see it's related to business process and how business process, a specific business process, is leveraging several technology systems and how data is being managed to effectively and efficiently implement this business process. That's what we are focused on here. And then as part of this introduction, it also talks about what are the two assessment pieces. The assessment, the first part is the general information, and then the part two takes you through each layer of the framework itself that focuses on the intelligent water system. At the end of the assessment, you will get a maturity score, which are also listed here in the table of contents too, right? Summary of results, and each individual layer will have its own results explaining why you got a specific score based on your selections during the assessment. And then again, we want to reiterate, right? Before you proceed with the assessment, please note that it is not a survey. I don't mind repeating this because we wanted to get this message across clearly. This is an assessment tool which requires staff and stakeholders involved in that specific business process to be engaged. Even they might be as remotely as IT people, because we're talking about more digital solutions, digital technology. So there could be people from IT, people who actually know the business side of how the tasks are being executed. Everyone should be involved to make this assessment tool worthwhile and the activity worthwhile and get appropriate results, meaningful results, right? And then the timing of this, we recommend you to go through this assessment in one session, preferably. But if not, I know it shows right now 48 hours. That timing can be changed. We're probably going to extend it for longer times. But make sure that you have ample time. You don't want to just start the assessment, never finish it. It's good to get it done in one session. So those are the three things that you want to know about as part of the introduction and instructions piece. Then if you click that, it goes to the part one. So if someone has already reviewed that piece, and if you wanted just to go through it, so you can come back here, right? Instead of clicking review introduction instructions, you can just click begin or continue assessment if you had already been there, and it'll take you straight to the part one, which is the general information. And that's the nice thing about this navigation menu on the side as part of the assessment tool. So, and then in the general information, we're just collecting information related to, or you would be inputting information related to the name, the organization name, the location from a country and region perspective, utility governance, public, private. That these are the basic things that has been collected as part of the assessment, but we can add anything in the future if people feel like other information could be useful too. Then this is the most important one, the question G3, which is the business process, right? Here you can see examples like meter reading as a example, sensor calibration, which are all minor, simpler business processes compared to something like a CIP prioritization or CIP planning, which may involve several organizational units or departments and divisions from your utility or the water company, right? So depending on what business process that you would like to review, that information has to be supplied. Otherwise, this won't proceed further. As you can see, try to do this, it won't go through. Please answer this question. I mean, you can force it, but it won't happen. This is the most important information. And hopefully people, before they begin this assessment, they have an idea of what they wanted to assess and who the right people are going to be as part of this assessment. Maybe we can give an example process, like I don't know. Kevin, did we want to ask anybody for any sample, or just to go through this?
Sure. Anybody would like to offer up an example or a process area? All right, let's just do a meter.
All right.
Just do like meter reading or something like that, probably.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say if maybe something is not here, right? Pump maintenance, something like that. Okay. And then it's this information asks you about who the organizational unit is. It could be operations, O&M is the major department, or however you want to name it. That's why we are using the terms organizational unit, which means some higher level unit, O&M, and then this could be just maintenance, and then this could be maybe E&M, electrical and mechanical team, right? Something like that. So that's basically not all, you won't probably have this kind of a third one all the time. So that information just captured. And then we are also asking about how many different organizational units, maybe just one, depending on the business process. But maybe for this pump maintenance, maybe there was 3 or 4. And then the first one is, like I said, O&M is your highest organizational unit. Maybe you have engineering and planning involved. And then maybe because of the data systems, maybe information technology is involved. It just shows that you have already considered all the people or who can be supporting and enabling this business process. And then the next one asks about how many people are going to be part of it. Let's say if you have 5 people, I'm sure they represent these. So if there are maybe 3 people or maybe 5 people, maybe O&M has the first name, name 1, name 2, and then name 3 who they are, name 4, and name 5. It's just note, so that you will have a record in the future that who participated in this assessment, who provided the comments here and whatnot. And if you want to get the results emailed to someone in addition to downloading it in the end, you can give an email address. And for sake, I'll just give this, and if you try to, I think, make sure it's a valid email. It will ask you for a valid email that is built into here. And then we go into, this is one of the last questions here, but basically ask about how would you like to indicate the level of importance of the following goals for the specific business process. What is driving you to go through this assessment? What are the important things that you want to improve for this business process? Few things that are here are, reduce staff time. We pick these things based on the other project. We got some input from the UAIM project where, what is important to people when it comes to business process, right? So these things are from those. These are something that we summarize from that project. But if you would like to add any other as goals for the specific project, and if you'd like to rate it, that gives you the opportunity to input that here. So that this completes. Maybe I'll say, staff very important. Better decisions, streamline, automating. Maybe that's extremely important. Deliverables, moderately important. Reduce risk. Collaboration, maybe that's very important, something like that. So then you move on, because then you go into the part 2, which is each layer. We want to have enough time to actually talk about. That's why I'm
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yes, I think maybe probably we could ask people on the part that you just went through, maybe the question, first of all, we'll just open up if anybody has any questions. But I think a question for the participants is, does this a concept of, selecting a business process area, functional area, does that resonate or make sense to you all?
So my only question on it is, how, assuming that, as you go across the utilities, you get a relatively random selection of process areas, how does that feed back into the project in terms of providing more, broad information based on that? I'm thinking it might be interesting for us, but I'm trying to figure out how it's helpful for the project to have that random selection.
Good question, Stephen. I know Prabhu, Cello, you guys want to respond to that?
I can help out. Perhaps a project usually involves implementing, doing some analysis and then and making improvements to a specific area or process or function, like Prabhu mentioned. So if, for example, your project has to do with the procurement, improving procurement or CIP planning, then that's the scope that you would be looking here. Is how can technology help you enable that function? Because project is typically addressing a specific business function. Does that answer your question?
I had to miss the very beginning of the call, but I guess so are we piloting? So is it the sense that we're piloting the tool, and what information you're getting back is our experiences in piloting it, or are you getting back information from what we're learning as opposed to whether the tool is helpful or not?
Well, Prabhu, you want me to answer or do you want to answer?
Go ahead, Cello.
Okay, so the purpose here is in this beginning is to select what is it actually that we're going to use the technology for. So like Prabhu mentioned, this is not a survey that somebody would fill out and get some general, 1 to 5 maturity level for the whole organization, because there are different aspects, pockets, functions, processes within the organization. And then, so this would, the purpose here is to provide a framework for the questions that the group would ask to get a sense for what are the challenges and opportunities related to implementing technology successfully.
Yeah. So, Cello, if I could add, Stephen, I think you might also be asking a couple different things. I think, Cello, probably, I think Stephen's asking the data that gets created from this, are we then taking the information and then aggregating it into some type of, macro view? I think the answer is that's possible, but that's not really the intent, Stephen. To sort of answer that question, it's really something that our remit here is to have developed the tool and continue to provide that tool in some support fashion, but we're not commissioned to do anything after that, Stephen. That's not to say we're not open to it, but we're not commissioned to do anything. Yep.
Yeah. So essentially, we're helping pilot, develop, test out the tool so that the tool can be refined to be made available.
Yes, to some extent. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. But I think you also asked another question, maybe, and we had a lot of discussion and debate about this, and that is, we at one time we thought about coming up with normalized names that for each business process area, and I think we quickly found ourselves going down a rat hole, which would be some people call their operations, O&M, some people call it service delivery. There's all kinds of names. So what we were not, if we were doing a very detailed research project where we were trying to do all these correlations, yes, I think then having some common nomenclature would be beneficial. But for the purposes of this, we left it free form for all the utility, for the participants to put names that they recognize versus ones that we sort of came up with some standard model. We had that debate, trust me, but in the end we decided.
That piece makes sense. Ultimately, the tool is for use locally, and so we get to name it any. We can name a process George, so long as we all agree that George is the name of the process.
Right.
Yeah, I got that piece. All right, thank you. That's helpful.
Yep. Other questions?
This is Mary Lynn Loader from MSD in Cincinnati, and I like that approach. I think that makes sense for us to be able to, use our own nomenclature and whatnot. So then I guess I'm just interested in continuing to see how the tool works in terms of what kind of assessment it's giving us and what kind of recommendations are coming out of it. But I think generally everything I've seen so far looks interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lynn. Other comments? Yvonne Carney, you must have a comment. I'll select people, Yvonne.
Oh, goodness.
He's putting it on the spot.
I know. I noticed that. I'd just say that we have a WISE team. I know there's a question earlier about testing this out, and there is a WISE technology and data team that is kind of absorbing this assessment as well, and trying to see how utilities might be able to implement. And so for the person who asked about testing out, if you are interested in testing it out, encourage you to join that team if not already a part of it.
Yeah, thanks, Yvonne. Any other comments about sort of general concept framework stuff? All right. Well, probably why don't you go into the next layer? We'll I think folks probably want to see where this leads. So we'll go to why don't you go to the next one now?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for all your questions and comments. So we're getting into the part 2, which is the assessment of each layer itself. So the layer 1 is the first one, which focuses on the sensing and generation, meaning it's trying to find out how do you gather data that is specific for this business process, how effective it is, how much do you know about it. That's basically what it's trying to assess. One of the things, again, we want to reiterate here, the goal is to find out, by going through this assessment, find out what the challenges and opportunities of leveraging existing data systems and technology systems in place. You may have to subsequently have another discussion, deeper dive. So the questions are trying to help you assess that higher level of these questions. So with that, so the first layer 1 has few questions or few assessment things that we need to. The first one talks about, okay, who is this business process supporting? Who are all the and by getting this data generated out of this business process, who are all the people that may benefit from this? So it could be depending on the complexity of the business process, such as maybe it's pretty localized, a calibration of an equipment as a business process. We may call it an SOP or something, right? It could be just a few people within a team. But on the other side, something as complex as a CIP planning, CIP prioritization, which will benefit and impact several departments, several organizational units. So that's what we begin with in terms of layer 1. And the answers here actually ask you specifically about, is it just an individual within a team? And it slowly increment the options here for you to choose. Here you can choose one or many. because some of the complex processes obviously is going to support somebody from, individual teams as well as all the way to departments or across several organizational units. That's why we have it as many as possible. But you can pick just one, two, maybe this is pump maintenance, right? So it's probably going to support depending on who is using the data from a pump maintenance. I'm saying maybe it's staff and managers from different teams within the same department, or probably from different departments. Depending on what we have seen, the information from maintenance is used by CIP planning people and asset management teams. So maybe that probably is what I would pick as options here for this question. And once we have that question, I'll move on to the next one. The next question focuses on, okay, now that we know we have selected how or who is benefiting from the data being sensed and generated from this business process, how much or where is this information related to the data is residing? Who knows about what to be done, what data to be collected? Has it been documented? If it's documented, in what format? How much of that is standardized? And that's what we're trying to capture here. So knowing who is benefiting and then moving on to, okay, we know this data is benefiting. Do we know the details of what to be collected, what to be generated and sensed, and how is it being documented is what this question about. So the better the documentation, we assume that, the better the maturity of the business process itself, because people would have already spent time to understanding the details and requirements of data needs for this specific process. And you would pick one of the options, as you can see, depending on how simple and complex and how mature an organization is in terms of documenting this knowledge about a business process. It could be residing in people's mind, heads, or maybe in simple narratives of SOPs, or maybe mature documentation like IT data models and data diagrams. But the higher the maturity, as you can see, the highest maturity would be like there is a standardized nomenclature and a model annotation. The UAM project actually talks about such process model documentation, right? So that would be one of the choices. So maybe I don't know how, depending on the utility, maybe I would pick here as a documented in standard operating procedures, because the one that we picked here shows up here, right? Documentation knowledge about the data that is generated by the pump maintenance process. Maybe it's here for the sake of it. But if someone wants to pick the third one, I don't mind picking that also. So we looked at the first one was, it can go back. We looked at who is it benefiting, this whole data sensing and generation happening within this business process. Then we looked at where is this knowledge about this data being sensed and generated resides. Now we move on to, okay, all right, hopefully the different types of data being used. Well, what we call about data here are data categories, right? You can see different data categories. Again, as you can see, this question must be answered because the rest of the assessment follows what choices are being, what options are being selected here. Since this is about how we are leveraging data and technology systems, this has to be selected at this point. So there are some of the commonly used data categories are listed here, but if you would like to add your own type of data category, you might as well add it here too. But if you guys want, right now we're showing 3, but we can add more options if you guys want it that way. So the list that shows up here are real-time operational data, historical data, maintenance data, some financial, spatial, obviously GIS, engineering data that could be models, hydraulic models, drawings, BIM files and whatever, timekeeping from HR, payroll, simple project management in terms of Primavera data on project schedules and budgets, sometimes maybe legal data, depending on what the business process is. As we said in the earlier part, the tool can be applied to any business process within the organization, not just engineering, not just O&M. It can be for anything from procurement. If you wanted to analyze how the procurement of A&E contracts are being managed, and how are you leveraging data and technology systems in place. So that could be one. So in this example that we are talking about, since it's pump maintenance, maybe we need operational data, must-have maintenance data, must-have maybe engineering models and things nice to have, and then asset condition and information. I'll just pick a few of them. I don't want to pick too many, but you don't necessarily have to pick not needed, but if you'd like to, it's there. For the rest of the assessment, we're going to focus mostly on the must-haves and nice-to-haves. The not needed and not sure is as an option here. So we can evaluate and say how much you know about it, not know about it. And this is one of the reasons why we mentioned early on that make sure we have people in this assessment that fully understands how this process is being implemented, what type of data is being used, and where the data is going to come from, how the data is being managed, and everything else. So having that right team is important to pick these right choices here. So once you make these selections, as I said before, now you won't see all the other options. It only shows the must-have data sources that you picked in the previous slide, previous question, and nice-to-have ones. And then this is the last question that we have. And since we are in the layer which talks about the collection, sensing, and generation of data, again, as we said, this is really high level. We're trying to test the pulse of how good each layer is in supporting the business process. So here we're focusing mostly on the data sensing and generation. So the options here are, how is this must-have data sources? Is it being sensed and generated? The data from these sources are being, manual, sufficient, manual, insufficient. Manual, as you can see, it means somebody is entering the data into the records, or somebody has to download it from one place to another places. Automated means it's all happening automatically, as the name suggests, right? We went quite a bit on how complex we could have this scoring scheme, and we ended up choosing a simpler one like this one, because then we don't want to get into the details of how, what type of manual, what type of automation. Then we get into the details of it. That's what probably is required in the next step, and someone wants to dive into the details of it. But for the purpose of this assessment, we are keeping it as, if you're doing it manual, is it sufficient, not sufficient? Just that way it's easier and simpler for everybody to move forward. So for this purpose, maybe I'll say operational data, manual insufficient, maintenance data, maybe manual sufficient, asset inspections, manual sufficient. Oh, maybe I'll put this one as, no, it's okay. And then engineering data is manual insufficient, something like that. So that completes the layer one. I just wanted to quickly talk about what we looked within layer one. Layer one again focuses on how good is the activity of sensing and generation of data that supports or being generated within the business processes. And for that, we talked about, first of all, who is going to benefit from the data being generated or used or created? Where is the knowledge about the data requirements, data interactions are being stored? Second question. The third one talked about what are the different data categories that we needed. And then the fourth one talks about the data that we need. How are we sensing and generating, collecting it? Is it manual, automated, sufficient, not sufficient, insufficient? So with that, would like to stop here and
yeah, let's get some comments or questions. I see Josh has got a question. I think it's kind of the end state question. Maybe we'll come back that second here, Josh. But questions about the layer one, about what we're trying to assess here, or questions about the process of filling it out. Do people have comments or questions about that? Yeah, maybe Cello, probably maybe one of you guys could talk. We had a lot of discussions about this layer one, about kind of really the importance of that layer, even though it's kind of the one that's probably the most kind of in the nitty gritty, but because it is a cascading kind of effect, maybe you guys could, maybe talk, or Chella, maybe you could talk a little bit about why is this layer so important? What's the importance of this layer?
Well, what we tried to capture is what is the data that we're collecting in order to enable us to do this process, and to see if it's okay the way it is, if it needs to be improved, so that we get a sense for both the challenges and the opportunities if we wanted to make improvements. So for example, if we look at this page, we say, well, when it comes to pump maintenance, this historical data, which is operational, currently is being obtained manually, and it's not enough. So it points to something that we would need to do about it. And if we take a systems view, we will know that this layer is on the bottom. It's a foundation. If we do not collect the data or generate, the layers that come on top to organize the data, to do the analytics, to do the decision support, are all impacted because we simply don't have the data. So it is very basic layer that impacts all the capabilities that are based on using and analyzing data. So it is kind of foundational. It also means that if we have serious problems on this level 1, we're not creating data or sensing it. Our ability to use technology in the upper layers is going to be quite limited. Yeah. So,
do people, would somebody be willing to talk about this in your organization? Do people see data quality, data management as an issue? Is this something that resonates with folks?
Hi, it's Gary Wong here, and just to follow up on Chavel's comment, he's absolutely right. So I was just wondering, with the assessment tool, are there interdependencies like going forward for the layers 2, 3, and 4? Because without the sufficient and proper instrumentation in place, the rest of the layers really don't matter in a way, because you won't be able to do what you're trying to do without having that data.
I think Prabhu can answer this question, but when we, I think the engineer in us would say, okay, like, what are we going to do about it? And so the results of this assessment tool will point to the fact that there's a weakness, not that that we're not very mature in terms of generating the data or collecting the data that we need. And yes, so when you look at the results, you will observe the maturity is low. We don't necessarily have an algorithm that will that would do the kind of analytics and analyze the impact, but just seeing the results and where the weaknesses are would really help somebody ascertain where the improvements are needed. Does that answer your question, Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Josh, Josh, maybe we'll come back to your question. I don't want to ignore it, but probably Josh says he filled out the survey or the assessment tool and he didn't get the result. I don't know if that was it was some kludgy thing. I guess we could at the very end, probably when you go through yours, we'll see if it spits out. Maybe we got some kludgy thing. I know, Josh, it didn't give you the result output there.
Yeah, it just says like the overall score is blank out of 5 for all my categories.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right. Let me go through it. When we created this table of contents as a add-on to people to navigate, but the functionality is in there. Maybe I just need to bring it into the table of contents also. There are some calculations that are happening in there. Let's go through it, but that's a quick fix if it doesn't show up. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks, Josh, for letting us know that. So, again, any other questions before we move on to the next layer? Good discussion. Okay. All right, probably why don't we go to the next one?
Okay. So the next one is, which is the layer 2, which focuses on the data management and governance, right? We'll probably create another slide in our section just to show that you are in layer 2. But as you see, the selections that you have made before carries forward into all the layers. Every time a question related to the data sources come into play. But the navigation menu allows you to go back and change too if you need to. For some reason, if you forgot to include one of them. But the focus of the data management governance layer is to assess more on the quality of the data that was sensed already, the completeness, the accuracy, a little bit more on how much how good it is in terms of how do I say the taxonomy, the naming conventions, because several times we have seen it, as Gary was talking about too, right? Once you sense the data, and especially if the data is coming from different data sources, and if they have a different taxonomy and naming conventions or different ways of representing the same information, it leads to a lot more time to actually make any sense of it, or even the data preparation, which might happen in the layer 3. So those questions are being handled here in terms of, okay, you have sensed and generated data, but then how good is it in terms of before you do the analysis, how ready they are basically for you to make your analysis. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this layer. And with that said, the first one talks about the ownership. The ownership, we're asking a question because, who is owning this data? If you are the primary owner, for example, if it's maybe process treatment plan optimization type process, then operational data is owned by the treatment plans, right? So, and here in this case, I would say the operational data is two options here. Teams that are actively engaged in this business process actually owns this data. They are the primary users or the primary data generators. Or they could be using a data that's generated and owned by someone else. So the operational data, I'm assuming pump maintenance here we're talking about, right? So it's probably the maintenance team. So they need data from they are the secondary users of the operational data, but the maintenance data work orders itself, they're probably the primary owners. And same with the asset condition inspection records, they're probably the primary users and the generators of this. Engineering data, they're probably the secondary users. The reason why we are asking this question is to give some weightage based on if it's something that you own, and if you don't know the quality and the accuracy of things that we're going to be asking in the next 4 or 5 questions, there's a different weightage to it. That's one of the reasons why we asked this question. So the first question about, okay, these are the data sources. Who is primarily responsible for generating the data, and who is the owner of the data? And then once we have that question, then we go into the accessibility of that data. Okay, you're generating using this data, and you can see accessibility related to, it's basically come from the perspective of structured and unstructured data types. And depending on the maturity of the organization and the technology systems in place, one of these options could be applicable. Here, the things that we are talking about, at least on the top ones, are mostly structured data, meaning they're usually in tables and records, but it could be in an unstructured file like an Excel file, which I've seen too from an asset condition inspection records. But operational data mostly is in either some type of historian database, and the maintenance data probably in some kind of an CMMS type application, or in databases. I don't know if it's sorry, I should pick this one, because depending on if you are able to actually directly access that, right, that's via APIs, then you would pick the fourth one. But if it's just stored within an application, which also requires another way of downloading, because we picked a manually downloading, so that's probably this one. So I would say within the application, this is probably within the application. Same way condition asset inspection records, maybe it's a whole bunch of unstructured files, engineering data, whole bunch of PDF files. These days it's probably in OneDrive or maybe local drives, depending on your condition. Maybe we'll put unstructured files. So the first one talked about who the owners of this data sources are. Next, we looked at how easy is it for you to access this data depending on where they are located and how the connectivities are from those location points. And that's what this question is about. Next one is ease of using, which basically talks about what I mentioned before. Okay, now that we have these different data types, if it's already in a format that there is an association to some kind of an asset that's linked to your operational data, maybe that's, you don't have to worry about pairing data from one source to another source. So which means there's a clear definition of the data hierarchy between these different data sources, a naming convention. So it's, you don't have to do a lot of preparation work for you to do the analysis, because the next layer is focused on the analysis and the analytics and the insights pieces. If we don't have it structured such that it can be easily done, then we have a lower maturity. And that's what we are asking here. Now, how easy it is for you to use this data once you have the data, once you have an access to it. One, because access is one aspect, but access comes with a format that's going to take a longer time, then we need to improve that. And that's what we're focused on here. So maybe I'll say does not, the operational data is probably not meeting the naming conventions or taxonomy. Maybe the maintenance data is the only one that you are responsible for. I'm going to use meets the needs. Asset inspection, maybe they're not, meeting the needs. And then engineering data, because it's all in unstructured form, it's typically probably there's no naming convention or hierarchy associated to it. So I just wanted to, every time I go into a question, I just wanted to remind everyone what are the things that we did. So we focused on who the owners were in the first question. And then next we focused on how easy it is for you to access the data. Now we are talking about how easy it is for anyone to use the data, even if you have access. It focuses on the format, the I don't want to use the word interoperability, which is not the case, which is not what we're talking about, but how easy it is for you to use the data for subsequent analysis. So once we do that, then we are asking, okay, it's all in the good format and everything, which is good. All right, how reliabilities? Do I know the quality? This is focused on the quality of the data. And that's what, again, these are all very qualitative statements, but if we have the right people in the room, as we said, this is not a survey for someone to, even today I'm going through really fast, but if we have the right people during the assessment, then they will be able to say, you know what, maybe it's 5%, or maybe we need to think about that too. We need to go back and look at how much do we even know that? So that's probably a question that might come up during the assessment. And if we don't know that, that's something to know about, right? How much of the data is not questionable or not questionable. So these are some of the things that we wanted to create as one goes through the assessment. So for the purpose of this one, I'm going to pick, maybe we put don't know, right? Because don't know, if you say don't know, actually it'll show up in the assessment results. Hopefully I have created the links here, but it usually shows up, you've said a lot of don't knows. So maybe you need to have the right people in place. And then maintenance, maybe we'll say 10% is questionable. Less than 10% is questionable. Inspection, less than 20%. Engineering data, we don't know, something like that. So we looked at the ownership of the data sources. We looked at how easy it is to access those data sources. We looked at the format, which is the taxonomy and the hierarchy of those data sources. And we looked at the quality or the reliability of the data. They may be in really good, hierarchy and everything. So that's what we talked about here. So the final one that we're going to look at is, okay, the completeness. Okay, we have reliable data, any measurement being done and stored in that cell, I fully trust it. But I have 100 cells. I only have, 10 of them filled out. So how complete it is, right? So that's what we are focused on here. Like, is it, do I have all the information there? Again, the question goes back to all these different options here. How much of your records from that data source is actually missing? When you go through this exercise, then it prompts the question of, do we even know that answer, right? If we don't know that answer, that's something to think about, because without knowing how much of it is complete, not complete, reliable, then how can we even focus on the next step, which is the analysis and the analytics pieces of it? So that's one of the things we want to, the message we are trying to convey here is, there's one aspect of going through this assessment, but the biggest value here is to actually, when you go through an assessment of a business process that you want to really improve, then you are opening up a conversation where you are identifying issues, like Chalo was saying before, that what are the challenges and the opportunities? Do we even know these things? So that's the biggest value that you're going to get, well, by going through this assessment. So for the purpose of our little run through here, let's say completeness, I'll say maybe I don't know about this operational because it's filled out by the pump maintenance folks, right? So if they don't have the historian folks from that team, they wouldn't be able to answer that. So if they want to actually go through this assessment, they would probably need the folks from the operational team also to tell them, hey, I need, this information is good. You have only 1% of the record missing or something like that. And maybe this is like that, and don't know, something like that. So this is the end of layer 2. Once again, I wanted to talk about those 5 things that we looked at. Who is the owner of the data source? Can I access it? And how accessible it is? And we talked about what is the format? What format is it in? Can I use it quickly and easily? Okay, it's in a good format and everything, but is it reliable? Do I trust that data? And the last one is, okay, I trust this data, but the entire data record is not complete. How complete it is for me to use it to make meaningful or insights out of it. So that's what we're going to we focused on layer 2. With that, I'm going to stop, and
yeah, let's see if there's any questions from the audience here. I guess our assumption is that data governance, data management is a challenge for most organizations. Is that a true statement? Anybody want to talk about that from their utility perspective? Is that a problem? Kind of a loaded question because we know it is.
Sure,
I
it is a problem.
Yeah, the key issue is, this question about having the data be developed once, centrally stored and available to all, as opposed to, even if it's developed once, stored locally and not easily available to all. And then, without even thinking about conflicting data streams where you have the same piece of information with 2 separate answers for the same question. So yeah, it is. We've empowered people to collect and use data on their own, and they went and did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yvonne, you were going to say something as well?
I don't know if I would say it as well. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think if we can move in that direction, and I think the opportunities sometimes do present themselves when we are moving to new systems, and so like putting that level of thought into the requirements for our new systems would benefit us greatly. So.
Yeah, and I know we have a couple of folks who are from the technology provider area. Maybe Peter, David, maybe somebody else. What's your guys' experience working with clients?
Gary has his hand up.
Yes, yeah, Gary.
Yeah, it's Gary Wong again. So I had a comment about the accessibility part of the questionnaire. And I think from how you've laid it out there, it could be a bit confusing for non-IT people because you talk about like API calls and things like that. If you're from the business, you probably don't have a clue about that and what that means, and don't really care really at the end of the day, because when it comes to accessibility, it's really about how easily accessible is that data, and we all know that that is very key into all this, right? If it's easily accessible and they know how to go about getting that data, having context around it, then they can likely do their job without having to call many other people. But if they don't have easy access to it, then it then comes down to the details of why that is, and where's that data stored and so forth.
Yep. Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so maybe that vocabulary probably, Jill, we may need to look at that a little bit here, see if there's a way to modify that to make it a little more explainable. Eric had his hand up as well. Eric Griffin.
For us here at Great Lakes Water Authority, it's a big organizational challenge because we are a water and a wastewater utility. Operations has responsibility for operations, and we're not organized in a way where we have a central data group. But we have a lot of great data activities going, but it's all in pockets around the organization. And we don't even come together probably like we should and have like a work group working together and getting these, the technical people together to have us in a direction so we can standardize things. I think that's the biggest thing is it's hard to have a common system when everybody's doing things their own way and the best they can, but it's challenging.
Yeah. Sure.
This is Mary Lynn Loader. One thing that we're doing in Cincinnati is using a lot of Power BI to pull stuff out of other, data sources from, whether it be our what we call EOPS, which is where we store all of our discharge data and our operational data from our operators, and like I said, Maximo or CityWorks or whatnot, and trying to have that one place to then pull from. And so, kind of going through this tool, I'm excited to kind of maybe do the pilot or whatever. Because we're really just kind of scratching the surface in terms of the pulling out that data and really getting those KPIs where I think they need to be. So I'm excited to kind of use this as a tool to help us advance this.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent comment, Marilyn. And the next layer talks about these challenges, the level 3. So I think that's what Prabhu is going to do next.
Yeah, just want to, we'll get to, I know we want to keep on track here, probably. I wanted to acknowledge there were a couple of comments, and the one thing Jim Serrano asked is it might be helpful to look at providing results after each of the level. So you go through level 1 or level 2, probably, Cello, I think Jim was suggesting, is there a way to, potentially see where you scored rather than waiting towards the end? I think that's what Jim's getting at. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, and it was just because I didn't have a chance to look at the tool before the meeting, but whatever, I mean, you know the tool better than I do, so whatever you think's most efficient for the group is fine.
Yeah, no, it's a good comment. I thought about it too, so we'll look into that, see how practical that is. And then Bina made a comment. I don't know if you want to expand upon it, but mentioned that they've hired a data management specialist so to focus on this. So hopefully that'll improve things. So anything you want to add to that, Bina?
Nope. Fingers crossed.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. I think just probably interest of time, Prabhu. I know I think we got about an hour left here, so a little less than that. So I want to keep going here. So maybe we'll go into layer 3 here, and then layer 4, and then we'll close things out. So, okay, take it away.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you for all the comments. All right, so layer 3. Now that we have seen the data sources, how the data is being managed, is it basically the question in the previous layer was, is it ready for data analysis and insights? That's basically what we are trying to find out. Now, we get into this one, this is a question that we need to answer here too, because depending on the business process, you at least have some kind of a descriptive analytics, right? What is happening. We're trying to understand what's going on in this business process. Or maybe this business process has some predictive requirements or even prescriptive requirements, not always. So we wanted to base the rest of the questions depending on the analytics needs of this business process. So for this one, I would say, descriptive, definitely we're looking at pump maintenance, right? So predictive, yes, maybe we'll say no for now, just for the sake of it. But it could be a one. But for what you are focusing on, maybe based on the goals of your organization or the goals of the pump maintenance of what you're trying to do is just only these two. So then we'll ask, okay, these are the data sources. Where are they coming from, for example? So data here, maybe I'll just put, okay, you know what? I was okay, SCADA or some historian, right? And then maintenance work order, some kind of a CMMS. I don't want to call anybody's name here because I know we have a lot of vendors here. I don't want to say one or the other. Inspection records are, it's probably, I don't know, it's Excel files. That's what MS Excel, a whole bunch of Excel files. Engineering data, and maybe you're looking at some drawings for the purpose of, or some calculations, engineering calculations also, MS Excel file. I don't know what you're looking for, but just assuming these are the things that the different IT systems that are supplying this data sources. And once you enter that information, then we see how much of that analytics capabilities that are already available in those applications. Or also, what type, the data that's the application contains only data that is relevant for the category, but does not have the functionality required for this category of the analysis. Meaning they have the data that we can use to do descriptive analysis, but we cannot do the analytics itself, something like that. But here the next question would be, yeah, it has both the data as well as the functionality in these things. Same way for the predictive. So that's basically we're trying to find out. So you expressed that you wanted to have these descriptive and predictive analytics capabilities. Do you have both data as well as the analytics capabilities available within these applications? So maybe we'll pick, the historians usually don't have it, right? So it's the database. I think maybe I need to look at different database depending on who you're talking about. And then maybe there is something there. This one I'll put for the purpose of this. There's no, I'm just picking these as options. So this is where we're talking about the current capabilities of the analysis, including the applications that you are selecting for these data sources. Then we go through, okay, now, all right, that Marilyn just talked about, right? Since we don't have enough capabilities in those applications, now we are using other outside those applications, so which is typically some of these BI tools. So are you using any of them? And if you say yes, then we go ask which ones. And depending on the organization, some are using Tableau, Power BI. If you want to add maybe Oracle BI, something like that. So for the purpose of this one, maybe we'll just put Oracle BI. Maybe you are using also Oracle BI too. Just no, we're not associated to anything. I'm just giving an example. These are just sample ones. And you go into the next one, same way. I think Marilyn, you brought a good point about do I have access directly to those things? Automated access does not even have automated access. Someone still has to bring data from all these different data sources, upload into the Power BI for them to do the analysis. So this basically talks about how automated is the access to those data sources to run the analysis. And then also, can you do the analytics within those applications? So maybe we'll pick these two as this one. It has access, but not have the, maybe it has the functionality, but not these two, something like that. Predictive capabilities, but you have to build it. If you had built that capability in those things, then you'll be able to pick those functionality as well as the access to the data as your option. But then again, just wanted to reiterate, send the message across that by going through this assessment, it creates and opens the opportunity to have that conversation about what we have and what we don't have, so that we can identify these challenges and opportunities for the business process to be improved. So that's the main purpose behind all of these things. So, and the last question, since we picked descriptive analytics and predictive analytics, it talks about, please indicate how the business needs have been identified. What type of analytics are, is it the report generation from just or all the way to some complex dashboarding? So that's the level of maturity that we are trying to expect here. So maybe we'll put these two here, what the requirements are. And that finishes up layer 3. So in layer 3, we talked about what are the business needs from the analytics perspective. Is it just you're trying to know what is happening, meaning descriptive analytics, or would you like to do more beyond that? And if so, the existing applications where these data reside, are they giving you those functionalities to do that? If not, are you using anything outside of that? And you need to say yes. How is access to that data, to that advanced analytics application? And then how good is it to satisfy your business needs from either descriptive or prescriptive analytics? And that's what we are focused on in this layer 3. Should we stop here?
Yeah, let's stop. Take some questions.
Yeah.
Comments? Questions? I know we have a couple, you mentioned probably we have a couple of technology providers, and I think Gary's on phone and Pete Gabor's on the phone and David Lee, and I apologize if I missed anybody else, but here we did get into some of the technology applications, and I just wanted to give, not to put you guys on the spot, but I wanted to give you a chance to kind of share your thoughts on the market and needs a little bit, guys. So I'll just open the floor to you guys.
Well, this is Dave. No, I'm very impressed with what I've seen so far. We've been having similar conversations with multiple utilities as they try and get their arms around this and move forward, and this really puts some nice structure to it. So far, I think it's walking down a path to give people a good understanding of where they're at and help them define where they want to go. So I like it.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Any other comments, guys? Thoughts? All right. Yeah, so probably, so what you've done thus far, L1, is you talked about creating data. Second, about how to govern the data. 3, how to put it in a way it can be analyzed. And the next one is how it's visualized, right? So why don't we have you go into to the next layer here.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dave, for that comment. So as we're in the final one, which is the data visualization and the decision support. But even when we talk about data visualization, the first question we're asking here is about, okay, do you know what decisions are being made, right? Because ultimately that's what has to be enabled and supported. So we're again making sure that there's a conversation that's happening behind what is that we are trying to achieve? What is the decision that we are trying to make here? So maybe for an example, pump maintenance, I would say time to maintain, something like that, and then priority of pumps to be maintained, something like that. So these are some from a pump maintenance perspective, right? Time to maintain priority of pumps to maintain, or critical. I mean, time to maintain is going. These two is going to probably ask you subsequent decisions underneath, right? You need to know the criticality and all of that. I don't want to get into the details. So the highest level, what is that you are trying to decide? What decisions do you need to know? What is that you are looking for? So again, that information right now, if people know when to maintain, it has a little bit about the documentation aspect of it here, right? That knowledge about what decisions are being made. Where does it reside? Do people know? Is it all being documented anywhere? So is it maybe by the members of the team? Maybe this is documented in SOPs, but priority maybe known only by people making decisions, something like that. So once this again focuses on the decisions that you are trying to make for this business process and where the knowledge related to that decision making is stored. So then we go into, okay, then we are talking about how these decisions are impacting the following aspects, right? Different aspects of pump maintenance. So these are we're basically reiterating what you just wrote in the previous question, which is time to maintain and the priority of pumps to be maintained are the two decisions. How does it, relate to these different factors here? Safety and security, major compliance with regulations, major financial, all these system reliability, maybe I'll say moderate, staff morale, major reputation, major service levels, major, but you can have your own type of other factors, how this decision specifically being made as part of this business process is impacting these aspects of the organization or other criteria that you would like to have for your organization. Then the last question is about how that information coming from existing analytics are used for situational awareness or selection of necessary actions for the pump maintenance. Because ultimately you're trying to know what's happening. Situational awareness is a concept that's being talked about a lot. And then selection, once you know what's going on, then you need to be able to make a decision also. So that's basically what we're asking. How is that you're able to use that information to achieve what you are trying to achieve for this business process? So, and we'll just pick a few here. That is the end of layer 4. Once you go through this, I'm hoping that it gives you the, oh shoot, okay. I'll fix it. Usually what would happen is it actually has the coding information. Yeah, something went wrong here. Anyway, while you guys are just quickly talking, maybe I'll see if I can just quickly fix it. So those are the 4 layers.
Yeah, why don't we ask some questions, Prabhu? I think, don't you have a sample that we did resolve? Yeah. Pop that up on the screen.
Yeah.
Maybe why don't you go ahead and pop that up, and I'll ask if there's any questions that people have about level 4.
Yeah.
I believe there was a question about wording phraseology. Maybe I'll just ask a question. I know I heard there was some question concerned about using things like API. Are there other terms that you've seen in here that you think that people would get a little bit stumped on? Anybody want to comment on that? Yeah, I guess, do people kind of understand now the idea, the concept of having probably multiple folks in the room after having seen this now, the whole thing, where you probably have you need to have the appropriate folks, whoever those appropriate folks are in the room, whether it's IT or engineering or operations or other. Is that apparent now? Anybody want to comment on that? See your question, Yvonne. Yeah. Yvonne, yes, can you share the prerequisite work needed before doing this assessment? Business process map, I believe. What else? System data inventory. Yeah, probably. I understand Yvonne's question. is before you sit down and fill this out, do you have the prerequisite information that people would need to be able to successfully complete this?
Yes. Well, the first thing, at least, that they should know which business process, right? That's the number one information. And then having what? So, sorry, were you saying? Were you going to say something?
Sorry, is it in that guideline document probably that we've put together?
Yeah, right now, yes, we do have some information about what they need to have. We left it at a pretty high level in terms of at least you should know what the business process is, but we can add something like if you have any other documentation related to the execution or knowledge about the business process, it's good to have. The moment we talk about knowledge of business process, again, there is a different level of maturity there depending on if it's just an SOP or people's head. Right, so we will add that information. Right now, we don't have that, Yuan, in terms of what they need. We only, because as you know, working on the WIME, not everybody has, or not every business process within the organization is pretty well documented. But we can add some information related. If you have these things, make sure you have those artifacts with you while you go through this assessment. That's a good point. Yes.
So maybe a quick little checklist of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, would that work, Yvonne? If there was a checklist of things?
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Cello, I see your hand. You have your hand up, sir.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah.
I just want to say that what Prabhu has presented is compatible with the scope and the definition of the deliverables for this specific project. But I also understand that this assessment is maybe just a beginning, and there must be some thought put into it before one gets into to this point. So it is very natural for people to try to look at the whole cycle from how do I select a process to how do I make improvement. But this the focus of this project was really just on this one piece, which is the assessment tool. And it would have to be placed, Yvonne is completely right, it would have to be placed into context, and we'll include some things into the guidelines document, but we also need to kind of stay within the boundaries of how the project was defined. There will be, and as Kevin has presented a slide, a more complex approach to this. It would then say, this is, if you think about people, processes, and technology, this is intended to cover the technology stack mostly. But within the context of the other two, there are similar assessments being done on a different project that was mentioned, the WISE project, WISE project, that it's actually a program that addressed the people side and the process side in a lot more detail. So, but the scope of this work and this presentation was really on assessing how to make sure, how are we doing today, and what are the opportunities for technology to enable better performance. And performance obviously will depend also on people and organizational culture and the whether the processes that are in place are any good and so forth.
Yeah, no, thanks, Cello. Cello on this project was always the voice of reason, as he always is. But it's really hard not to get out of scope, or it's really easy to get out of scope on something like this. Yvonne?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to add an additional task here. I'm just saying, like, for it to be usable, there's information that utilities need to do on their own before using this. And I'm just, trying to clarify what
Yeah.
those pieces of information are, not trying to add new things here.
Absolutely, absolutely, you're right.
Yeah, there was a couple things we didn't mention yet so well as well. So certainly as the assessment itself, there is the guideline document, probably what you show, which is kind of built in there. There is a video as well that will go with this, that will sort of give the maybe the high level overview of you know what this is all about, and it'd be a bit maybe a 3-5 minute video kind of presentation that's more higher level. So yes, Jim, you have a comment here. I'm looking. It sounds like mapping this to other tools when they are all done will be helpful. I think you know, maybe Jim, if you want to elaborate, but I think Cello, that's kind of what you were getting at. There's some other assessment tools out there that you've been involved in, others where they're assessing you know, a deeper dive or the organizational and the process components, some of the stuff that you've been working on in WISE and UAM. So I think those are kind of things that you were referring to, Cello.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't mention, folks, is that we had mentioned in previous presentations, and I didn't show it as a deliverable. We actually did a fairly extensive literature review. And actually, Mark Loria, I don't know if Mark's still on the phone from Stantec, but Mark, and as well as ourselves, but Mark was the person in particular that led that task. And you know what we were hoping for is we'd find something that was already done, and you know we could say, hey, here we go, it's already been done. I think we found a lot of different maturity assessments, but they were either very high level, very IT oriented, or they were very specific to a domain like pharmaceutical or something. So this is why we ended up with, but we did start out with the idea that if there was already something out there that did this, we were certainly open to that concept, but we never did find anything that applied. And I know Cello and Prabhu, or if Mark's on the phone, if you want to add to that thought, but feel free to do so. But
I think you said it well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Gary, for your comment. Any other questions about layer 4? Oh, sorry, Prabhu. So you've got your score up. Sorry, I forgot about that. You want to explain what it looks like when it's not a little kludgy? Yeah, you're on mute, buddy.
I apologize. So I'll fix that, and then when we republish this, it'll work. But anyway, what you will usually get is this a sample that before we created the table of contents was. You will get a layer score, a summary of the layer scores from data sensing for each one of them. And then there will be scores related to each layer, like explaining from a perspective of complexity and the impact of the selected business process, depending on what you selected, and then documented knowledge. These are the things that we talked about before, right? As we were going through the layer 1. And then same for layer 2, talks about, these are the things that we talked about, ownership of data. And it will tell you, why, how many must-have data sources you have, why did you get a specific score, and then accessibility, the hierarchy and taxonomy, reliability and completeness. So it gives you an explanation of all the things that we had gone through and an explanation of why you got a specific score for each layer. And that's how we would finish this off. And then I think in the end, you will also get to a point where you will be able to download this response summary as you saw here, which will be including all of this, all the selections that you have made from all the way from the beginning to the end, including even the introduction pieces of what you entered. And with the email thing, if you had entered the email, you would also get an email, which I believe I need to add that, get an email with this information PDF to the person whose email was included in that question from section 1. So again, I just wanted to, without diving into the details of each question and everything, the intention, as we kept mentioning throughout this discussion, is that the intention is to primarily drive a conversation, have the right people in place, identify all the challenges and opportunities of how to improve a specific business process and how technology systems can be leveraged to effectively implement the business process. As we go through this exercise collaboratively, we believe that it's going to add value to the team who's trying to improve a specific business process, along the way able to identify what the gaps are, which can be further, probably in other sessions and other improvement sessions can be added by the team to focus on those specific challenges and opportunities that they identify as part of this process.
Thanks, Prabhu. Any questions for Prabhu related to the results? Prabhu, Josh asked, he's wondering if he will have to add all the info again to get the score. Do you know if he has to go back and add everything back in, or is it cached?
I will find out. I need to test that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Josh will get back to you and others on that answer. Good question though. Okay. So I think with that, one maybe last thing is where this is going to be hosted or where it's going to be published. So our plan is to work with WRF and Mary in particular to get this hosted out onto the WRF website. So that's where it will be found. It may be found in other places too down the road, but at least initially it will certainly be available to WRF subscribers on their website. The details yet to be kind of ironed out, but that is the plan, is to have it hosted there probably within the next month or two. So well, so I think we have a couple other questions, Cello. I think you put together, let me, if you don't mind, Prabhu, I'm going to take over for a second. I think, Cello, we have a Mentimeter. We have some remaining questions for folks. So let me bring that up. Oops, sorry guys, I thought I had opened up my, are you seeing the PowerPoint, Prabhu?
No.
Yeah.
We see our schedule or a meeting notice.
Well, that can't be very interesting. Sorry about that, guys. Let me try this one more time. Thought I had, let me get them. For some reason, guys, I'm having a little bit of a problem displaying this. I don't know why I can't select this.
I tell you what, I can give people information how they can log in. I don't have the scan code though, so that would be really nice if you could pop that up.
Yeah, Jello, for some reason Microsoft is not allowing me to show this file here, and I have no idea why that is the case.
Okay, so let me just see. Okay, let me just see. We'll have to go in a different way. Can I take the?
Yep. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm not sure why I can't share a file.
Yeah.
So
if you go to Mentimeter, you go to menti.com and use this code. You will get a, can you see my screen, Kevin?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so if you go to menti.com and use this code either on your mobile phone or your computer, you will get a chance to answer these questions. And the purpose of this one is to say, what are the challenges that you've seen, experienced in getting full value from technology? And then you will say from this is not a problem or a challenge to this is a significant challenge. And the options are technologies not available, it doesn't work, technologies, different ones are not integrated, they're in technology silos, we have difficulty with technology adoption, and you just rate each one of these challenges in terms of how much have you experienced this in your organization. So let me know, just a second, let me know if you are, I'm sorry about this flickering. It is, but you can see dynamically should be able to see the results. Give me just 1 second and see if this is going to work better. Okay, so this works a little better. So we have about 4 people responding so far. And if we could get a few more responses, it would really help us figure out where the challenges are. We have 6 people. So let's give people a bit more time. We have a couple of more things, but it would be very useful to get kind of answers to these questions. We have 7 people. So Kevin, you can let me know. It seems like you know, people are answering it, just maybe. And still at the top of the screen, you can see the website. Mm-hmm. And my chat line doesn't work. But this is also, if you want to type in, this is a direct link. If you go www, I would copy it and put it in the chat line, but the chat line is not letting me do that today.
I did, Cello. I actually did. I actually put that in.
Okay, excellent.
I did do that. So
okay, so we have 10. Let's get a few more. 11. But this would be an excellent feedback in terms of you know, the issues and challenges that people are facing. Kevin, you let me know when you want me to go to the next question. There's one more, 12.
Yep. I think that's good, Cello. Well, okay. Go to the next one here.
So I will go to the next question. And you should see something like this, which is what would be a good follow-up effort to this project that you've seen? Whether it be to test the assessment tool in real case studies, update the tool and guidelines based on the results from case studies. How helpful will these different things? Connect this assessment of technology with assessments for people and processes, develop methodology for improvement based on the results. So that would also, I think, be useful for WRF as well. And people are responding. Let's
yeah, give it a minute or so, Cello.
Yeah, sure. We had 12 on the previous one, so if we can get it at least to 12. Seems like there's none of these things have been looked as useless. So we have 12. Let me know when you want me to go forward Kevin?
Yeah, I think let's go ahead, Cello.
Okay. And finally, if you can just, in a few words, just summarize, just type in a comment or what was your impression from today's workshop, whether it was boring, exciting, or whatever, useful, not useful, whatever. And so that we can get a sense for what is your overall impression. Did your question, did you, oh, okay. Okay. We're getting some responses, and you can enter as many things as you like. And we'll give people a chance. I just want to mention that one thing that we couldn't do, that I typically do in workshop that we had for UAM and WISE is I make special dark chocolate and espresso cookies that help people stay focused. But since this was remote, we couldn't we couldn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that brings up a good point, Shella. While we're waiting, there is a workshop at Utility Management Conference, a half day. We were actually going to do it in Atlanta last, was that September, October, guys, whenever it was, but because of COVID, we weren't able to do that. But they gave us another opportunity to do a workshop here. So in Orlando, and I'm not sure when UMC is, it February-ish, guys? I think somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's February.
Yes.
And I promised to make cookies, guys. So.
Promise to make cookies, exactly. Yeah. So we will.
This is all I had, Kevin. We have a few more coming in.
Okay.
And this is very much appreciated. And let me know when you want me to get out of this, Kevin, and you can take.
Maybe give it another minute, Cello. Maybe there might be more things there. But, you know, maybe while we're just kind of finishing up, maybe I know we got about 10 minutes here, and I'd like to help people buy back 10 minutes of their life. But I did want to just kind of open it to the floor if people have questions, immediate questions. We're certainly willing to take those. We're also willing to take questions later on if you want to send them to us. I guess maybe you know, we can talk about the process for doing that if you have other questions. But does anybody have any immediate questions they'd like to ask of the team?
I also wanted to make one final note, if there are no questions. There will be on that broader effort called WISE that there will be 4 webinars. WEF will have 4 webinars dedicated in January, dedicated to business processes, February to technology, March to people, and April will be change management. There are currently about 80 people from more than a dozen utilities collaborating on that stuff. And it is, I would suggest if you have time, you may want to check out these WEF webinars. And there will also be a workshop on that WISE program at the Utility Management Conference as well. And it's convenient. This one will be in the morning, and the other one, the 5039, will be, I think, in the afternoon on the same day.
Yep. Okay. Any remaining questions from folks? Well, first of all, finally I'd just like to thank all of you for your time. A number of you, we've tapped into your brains over the last year or so. I know, Yvonne, we've had you on a few phone calls, and Pete Gabor and Andrew Lee and John Norton and probably the folks from Pinellas and Emily. We have a number of folks who've been tapping into your brain, and we thank for your input. I really like to thank our team, Prabhu, Mark Loria, Gino Lehman, Cello. You have been the Zeus and the thought leader of this. So I thank you, tremendously for all of your help. So I think without any further ado, we'll end this meeting. We've got your comments. Probably what we'll do is we'll consolidate the comments. We'll get those to Mary. Mary may want us to distribute those comments back to people, or we'll just do it directly. So, but anyway, Cello, go ahead.
Just don't forget to stop the recording.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll do. We'll do. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Give you a few minutes of your time back. Get any questions, feel free to ping any one of us. All right. Take care.